Time to introduce the application that we'll be working with on this course. It's a Node.js Express application that uses Redis as the only data store. Our application is a social check-in application, so users will visit locations that we'll maintain a list of in our database, and we'll show them information about each location, such as the opening hours, the name of the location, where it physically is on the map, and the average number of stars that users have rated it. So our users can then choose to check in at that location and tell us what they think their star rating is. So I might check in at the Cat Cafe and give it 5 stars. And what'll happen then is we'll do some data processing and update the Cat Cafe's overall number of check-ins and average star rating accordingly. And would also update my user record to say I was last at the Cat Cafe and when I was there. So we'll also need a way for users to log in and establish a session with the system. So we have different services for each of these things. Starting at the top, the API server there is primarily responsible for reading data from Redis. So it's an Express application that exposes REST-like endpoints, allowing applications to get things like the details for a given location or perform queries such as what locations are near this latitude, longitude. The check-in receiver service deals only with check-ins. So when a user checks in, we're going to write that data into Redis, and we're going to use a Redis stream for that. And once we've done that, that's all that service is going to do. It's just going to deal with receiving check-ins. It's not going to do any work on them. Asynchronously, the check-in processor service is going to use that stream as a buffer. And what it's going to do is just read from that stream. And every time it sees a new check-in on there, it's going to update the user and the location data that we're going to store in Redis hashes. But it's going to calculate a new points total for that venue or location. It's going to update where the user was last seen and when. Authentication service manages logins. It'll persist sessions to Redis so that other components can use them. And then there's a one-off data loader that we're going to use just to load some sample data. So the best way of looking at our data entities is to look at some of that sample data. So we have users here. So for each user, we're going to store a flat map of field name value pairs. We're going to store their name, their email. We'll decrypt the passwords when we load them so that they're not plain text in Redis. Then we're going to store some numerical data about them. So number of check-ins that they've performed on the system, the location we last saw them at, and the date and time of their last check-in as a timestamp. So we're going to store these in Redis hashes, which are great for these flat maps of name value fields. And they also allow us to do things like increment these values as treating them as numbers rather than strings. So hash is a really good fit for this. Similarly, locations, a Redis hash will be a good fit for as well, because we are going to store a mix of numerical values that we want to do some simple math on and string values. We're going to, for each location, store the name of it. We're going to give it a category. So whether it's a cafe or a gym or a hairdresser's or a restaurant or some sort of retail business. We're going to give it a physical location, so a point on the Earth that it lives at, and they're going to be in longitude, latitude format, which is the opposite from the normal lat-long format, but that's how Redis likes it. And we're going to see how to use Redis search to perform queries against some of these facets of the information. And again, we've got some numerical information here. We want to store how many check-ins have ever been recorded at this location. We want to store a total number of stars that this location has ever received. And then if you divide one by the other, we'll get an average number of stars. So locations and users work very well with Redis hashes because we're storing a flat map. Extra details for a location is a little bit more complicated. So for each location, we want to store its opening hours. So we have those here. We want to store them by day. And what we've got here is a JSON document that's an array of objects. And we've got some additional stuff that we want to store in here. So there's another object down here that's an array of an object containing all of their social handles. Then we've got some strings for website, description, and phone. So a Redis hash is not a good match for this because a hash is a flat map of keys values. And here we have nesting and arrays. So what we're going to do in this case is use the Redis JSON module that allows us to store this JSON without serializing it into a string and make queries against it using a JSON path query language, and also to update it atomically. So we're going to use the Redis JSON module for this. We're going to use hashes for locations and users. And then for our check-ins, which comprise 4 bits of information, a timestamp, a user ID, a location ID, and a star rating, we're going to put those in a Redis stream because they form a natural sort of time series, and Redis streams organizes things by timestamp by default. So that's a great fit. It also allows us to decouple our check-in receiver component that's going to receive these check-ins and put them in the stream from our check-in processor component that's going to do the math and update all of the locations. So they can work at different rates. The great benefit with streams is we could add other consumer type processes that would read from the stream and do something else as well. So if we wanted to put these check-ins in a data warehouse or do some sort of other calculations on them, we could keep adding different consumers that could all read from the stream. So that's a very brief overview of the application architecture. What we'll do next is get you up and running, get the code on your machine, and load some data into Redis.